coming! They're coming!
Vietnam wanted independence from France directly after World War II. The Vietnamese leader, Ho, asked the U.S., the leading country at the time, to acknowledge Vietnam as its own independent country, but the U.S. declined, claiming that the French colonial rule would keep stability in Vietnam. Ultimately, by declining, the U.S. could further ensure that they could support France, proving to Vietnam that they should remain a non-communist region. Meanwhile, because of the United States' decline, in late 1946, Vietnam declared war on France in an effort to achieve independence. This eventually leads to U.S. involvement. In 1955, President Dwight D. Eisenhower sent advisors to South Vietnam because the North and South had already split.
Geneva Conference. In 1954, the Geneva Conference was held in Geneva, Switzerland, in order to work things out in Vietnam. Ultimately, the conference resulted in the splitting of Vietnam. Northern Vietnam to be governed by Communist Viet Minh, and South Vietnam to be administered by a democratic group.
2. Anti-war movements. In the early 1960s, U.S. military involvement was supported throughout the states simply because of the domino theory, that when one country falls to communism, surrounding countries will fall as well. However, by 1967, polls proved that only 35% supported the war, and many more were unsure of the reason the military was deployed in Vietnam. By late 1965, protesting organizations were formed, and thousands of protesters were seen marching throughout cities of the U.S. Many signs were made to assist the protesters, especially after drafts began to occur.
What?
You're sitting on that little
Yeah.
Did you tell him a while ago?
Yeah. No, not really.
You really seem upset. I tell him, worry about it. But
There were four main battles during the Vietnam War. Number 1 was the Battle of Hamlet, which took place January 2nd, 1963. It was the first battle of the war in which 30 Viet Cong guerrillas faced off against 1,400 members of the Southern Vietnamese group. The Viet Cong won.
We got mortars inbound! Mortars coming down! 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 Get down! Fuck! Mortars inbound!
Number 2 was the Tet Offensive, which was considered the turning point of the war because it proved the war was far from over and that the Viet Cong was pretty much in control of things. It was planned for many years, in which 27 different Viet Cong divisions attacked U.S. military stations at the exact same time on Tet, which is the Vietnamese New Year. This took place January 30, 1968. Number 4, the fall of Saigon, which is the capital of South Vietnam, was the North Vietnamese capture of Saigon. Basically marked the end of the war because the South surrendered, April 30th, 1975.
We need a medic! We need a medic! Keep firing! Get down, grenade! We got troops all around us! We need support!
The Eastern Offensive, number 3, was called the intelligence failure because of our overconfidence that we were in control of things. This took place March 30th, 1972.
This here is the M16.
It was used by the American military. They could be fired two ways, semi and automatic. It's one hell of an ass kicker, but was due to jam frequently in mud and water. But it killed a lot of Viet Cong. This here's Delilah. She is like the dogs used in the K-9 unit during the Vietnam. She was used to sniff out traps and Viet Cong tunnels, although she was often bombed because she was so valuable to the military. Was the nickname given to a large transport helicopter that was shaped like a banana.
In 1979, a memorial was built in Washington, D.C. for all Vietnam War veterans. U.S. soldiers were supposed to destroy letters they received so their families could not be tracked down. About 50,000 Vietnamese children were fathered by U.S. soldiers. Songs like Haire U.S. by the Beatles, A Magic Carpet Ride by Steppenwolf, by the war. This war was also known as the Living Room War because it was the first to be televised. Soldiers fought during harsh monsoons. Many soldiers got boils, diseases, and infections due to the wetness.
Alright. After 13 years of being in Vietnam, President Johnson realized the American war effort was pointless. And so, the Paris Peace Accords was initiated in an attempt to pull the U.S. out of Vietnam. North Vietnam stalled all talks of peace with the U.S. in order to get a better deal from a new president. It was an election year. Richard Nixon became the next U.S. president and set forth with the goal of achieving an honorable peace. His strategy to obtain this had three main parts. 1. Vietnamization. This was a process to strengthen the South Vietnamese army and let them take over the war, allowing the U.S. to leave. 2. Expanding the war. This allowed South Vietnamese and U.S. troops to enter Cambodia and Laos to destroy communist troops that supplied the North Vietnamese army. And 3. The final part of Nixon's strategy was to achieve peace with the Soviet Union and China, two other communist countries that could defend North Vietnam in the war. By creating peace with these countries, Nixon hoped to get them to persuade North Vietnam to end the war. Nixon's strategy was a big stepping stone in getting America out of Vietnam. However, there were a lot of negotiations to be made. The Paris Peace Accords was back on, and both sides were serious about talking due to the shock value of the Easter Offensive, which proved that South Vietnam could not win the war without U.S. involvement. Henry Kissinger and Lee Duc-Tho, representatives from the U.S. and North Vietnam, worked out an agreement that would finally end the United States' involvement in the war and hopefully end it altogether. It was successful in ending U.S. involvement. However, it failed in ending the war between North and South Vietnam. All of this was made official on January 27, 1973.